Welcome back aliens, my name is Navin Reddy and in this video we'll see how to create a Django application on Docker. So we have talked about Docker, then we have seen how to install it, but it's important for us to understand how to build an application using Docker. See, there are two ways of having your application running on Docker. First, we can create a project separately and then we can Dockerize it, or we can say we can containerize the application so that it will run on Docker. The other way is you can create the application inside the container itself. I mean, you can install the Docker, you can install the Django framework on Docker, and then you can write a code. So by default, you are going with that way of writing your application on Docker. So the moment you run this application, it will directly run on Docker container. So we are going for the second way in this video. Of course, we have to also understand how do we containerize the existing applications, which we are going to see in the next video. So in this video, we are trying to create a Django application on Docker. So of course, on this machine, you need Docker installed. So let me just verify, do we have Docker installed? So if I go to terminal and if I search for Docker version, and yes, there is a Docker installed. I just need to create a Django project here. And of course, we are going to write a simple hello world application. We're not going to do something big here, because see, if you know how Django works, of course, once you see this video, you will understand how to get a big application on Docker, or you can just Google it out, how to add database and different stuff. But here the important thing is how can you build the application. Now, if you're not sure how to write a Django application and what is Django, I have a series on Django available. So in the description area, you will find a link for the Django series. Django is basically a web framework for Python. So of course you can build web application using multiple languages. We have Java, we have .NET framework, we have PHP, we have Python. And if you want to build web application using Python, one of the best framework is Django. So let's start with this. Now, first of all, let me create a folder. And yes, we are going to use an IDE here, which is, or the editor here, which is VS Code. So you need VS Code as well. Of course, you can use any IDE which you prefer, but if you want to follow along, VS Code is preferred one, so that you will not get stuck anywhere. So let me create a folder here. So I will say mkdir, and I will say this is projects, and let me just switch to projects here. And in this project, I want to create a Django application, but then I want to put that in a separate folder. So I will have that folder name as Telusko. Of course, you can have any name, doesn't matter. And let me switch to Telusko here. And let me create a project. But then even before creating a Django project, you need to do some setup on Docker. Remember, we are building this Django application on Docker. So we have to write some configuration files for Docker. Now on Docker, we have different options for configuration. One of the best configuration file for Docker is Docker file itself. So what is Docker file? So Docker file is a configuration file which helps your Docker engine create a containers for you. So based on the image, so as we have discussed before, we have images, and with those images we create containers. Now in this image, what features you need? So what are the layers you need? We mentioned that in the Docker file. But what happens, when you are working on the big application, when you work on the enterprise application, you don't have one container running. You might be having multiple containers. And to configure all these containers, at what time you want which container to get started, you can use a special feature of Docker, which is Docker Compose. So we are going to use Docker Compose here as well. I mean, if you want to use this application, if you also want to work with database, then Docker Compose makes much more sense. So we'll start with that. So let's use Docker Compose. But then if you want to configure Docker Compose, you need to create a file. So I will go to my VS Code, and the folder which we have created, let's open that here. So I will go back to VS Code. I will say open folder. So I'm in my projects folder where we have Telusko. Let's select that and click on OK. So I'm in this folder where we have Telusko. Let me just close this. And here, so this is my folder where I have to create a Docker Compose configuration file. Now what format it supports? So normally we can go with JSON, or you can go with YAML. So let's go with YAML, which is sophisticated JSON. So let's do that. So the file name has to be docker-compose, and the extension we are going to use is YML. Of course, you can also go for the 4-letter extension, which is YAML, but then YML makes sense. Now, once you got this YML file, you have to write a configuration here. But then we'll write the Docker Compose configuration later. Initially, let's go with the single container configuration, which is Docker file. Let me also create one more configuration file. This is for Docker specifically, so which is Docker file. And remember to have this name as D capital. That's important, D capital, and it's a one word where F is small. There's no extension for this. Click on enter. So we got two files here, which is Docker Compose and Docker file. Now in this Docker file, we have to write some steps. Now you can just go to Google and search for how Docker file works and how to do that. So in this video, I will give you some steps of creating this application. So my VS Code says the Docker extension is recommended for this type. So yes, it is helpful for you to have these extensions in your machine. So I got a Docker extension as well. So it makes your project easy and manage and debug containers applications. So of course it will give you suggestions and it will let you know what went wrong anywhere. Okay, so here what I will do here is, first of all, I have to mention, see, but when you talk about images in Docker, it is created with the help of layers. So one image will be having multiple layers. So we have to start with the base layer. So this project is built on what? So this project is built on Python. So what I will do, I will say from, so we have to mention the base image, and the base image for me is Python, and the version we are going for is 3. Then we have to mention the environment variable. So let's set that first, Python unbuffered. Then we have to create a folder. So normally when you run the application in the container, it's good to have all your files in that particular folder. So let me create a folder here, and then the command I want to execute is mkdir in the container, and for that we have to use this run command, and the internal command, the Unix command we are going to use is mkdir. And remember, I'm doing this practical on Linux based system, so the container which we are going to use is Linux based, of course. So I want to create this inside an app folder. So of course you can have any name, so let me just have it app. And then I have to switch, I have to mention my working directory. So where I want all these files to be, I want it to be app. Now the next thing would be, so let's say we are using Docker to run Django, but then we have to install Django on the server, right? We don't have Django as of now. So we have to install Django. How do we do that? Now if you have seen my Django series, we have to install the Django admin on the system. So here as well, in this container, we have to install Django admin. But how do we do that? So the one way you can do that is by creating a separate file. And the file we have to create is called requirements.txt. Of course, you can have a name. So let me have this file name as requirements.txt. This is where I will mention what requirements I have. See, in your project, you might be having multiple requirements. Maybe you have a requirement for MySQL, maybe you have a requirement for Django. So here we have to mention all these things here. So we have to say Django, we need Django, and the version we are going to use is 2.2. So we can use double equal to, or you can also specify relative operators, which is less than, greater than, if you want to specify the version which you're going to use. So that's one, we only need Django. And to include that here, we have to inform our Django application, hey, we have to instruct our Docker that we have to install Django. And the way you can do that is by using copy. So we have to copy this requirement file in our project. So I will say requirement.txt. We have to push that in our folder, which is app. Okay, that's done. Now, once you have, see, the main thing is in your container, you'll be having this app folder. Now this app will have your source code, your requirement.txt. No, this will not have your source code, but this will have a requirement.txt. Now, once you have requirements.txt inside your app, you need to install the requirements. So you have to again run a command, but this time you have to execute the installment commands, right? So if you want to install something, we use pip. Maybe if you don't have pip in your container, it will have pip based on which type of Linux you are using. If you are specifically focusing on Alpine, I'm not sure Alpine has pip. But I guess by default it will use Ubuntu. So pip will be there. If you get errors with this pip install, make sure that you also install pip. Okay, so in one of the command run, you have to also install pip. but I'm assuming that it will have pip, so I will say pip install r, and then I have to mention the file name, which is requirement.txt. Now this will install all the requirements which is mentioned in the requirements.txt. Now once you have that, you have to copy the entire project, entire folder which you are creating in your VS Code into the app which we have mentioned here. So basically this app will have the entire project in the container. That's it. That's your Docker file. We got an error here. That should be capital. My bad. Okay, so now once we have reached till this point, it's time to move to our Docker Compose. So yes, we have done with requirements.txt. We have talked about Dockerfile. Let's move to Docker Compose. Now in Docker Compose, we have to mention different steps. Maybe you want to work with database. Maybe you want to run the server. So you have to mention all those configuration here. So this will simply follow the steps. This is the main file which will start your containers, which will link your containers, and so forth. So first of all, let me mention the version number for your Docker Compose. We'll say 3. And then we have to mention all the services which you want to run. So do you want to run a web service? Do you want to run a database service? Now in this example, I just want to focus on the web service. So what I will do is I will mention all the services. So I just want to run one web service. So I will say web : and in this web, I have to first mention what to build. So I will build the current folder. So when you say dot, it will build the current folder. If you have this in some other folder, you have to mention the entire path. Now, once you have your build ready, of course, you want to run your Django application, right? Now, when you run your Django application, you have to mention the host port numbers. See, what happens is when you request this from the browser is external to your container, right? So browser will talk to the host machine, and host machine will have its own network system. Your container will have its own network system. So you have to mention that you want to accept the request from all the hosts, from anywhere. For that, I will say command, and I will say Python. You have to run your server. Remember, when you work with Django, this is the command you have to pass: Python manage.py run server. But with this, you have to also mention the IP and the port number from where you want to access. So I want to access from everywhere. So I will say 0.0.0.0:8000. Now that's the port number I'm using. You can use any port number, doesn't matter. The next thing you have to mention is volumes. When you run your application on Docker, it will have a container. Now inside your container, you can write data. The only problem is container will lose data once you destroy the container. So what if you want to store some data for a long time? And that's where we will use volumes. So you can also mention volumes. Of course, we are not going to use volumes in this code, but maybe if you want. So you can mention volumes. So the volumes I want to put inside app. Now which port I want to expose? So I want to use port numbers 8000:8000. And that's it. Once you have mentioned this, your web service is ready to use. But will this really work? That's a question. So till this point, nowhere we have actually created a Django application. We are simply doing all the configuration. Now, once you have done with the configuration, it's time to create your Django project. But how do we do that? It's actually very simple. You just need to move to your command line or raise a terminal. So I will go to terminal, I will say new terminal, and this is where I will create a Django application. Now for that, you will say sudo Docker Compose. You will use Docker Compose to create your Django application, because that's where, yeah. So that's where we have a web layer. So here you will say run the service name, which is web. So this is the web service you have to mention, web. And then the command, the actual command. The actual command which we are going to use is Django admin. Remember, this is how you create a Django application. And then you have to mention start project, and then you have to mention the project name. So I have the main project name as Telusko, and the Django application which I want to create here is, let's say, what app I should create. I will say my site. I know that's weird, but let's say my site. And I will say dot, this is in the current folder. I want all this code. I will say enter. It will ask for the password. Let me just do that. Now it will take some time to create this because it will download all the required layers for you, as you can see here. So depend upon your internet speed, depend upon your machine speed, it will take some time. So as you can see, we have downloaded all the images here, and we have the Docker application ready. So if you can see on the left hand side, we have a my site app, And here we have settings.py, we have url.py. This is where the magic happens, right? But is it really working? Now, first of all, even before running the application, okay, it says we have to install the extension for Python. Let's do that. Extensions are actually very important. So this is where the magic happens. But then even before running the application, we have to understand the permissions here. So if I do the listings, you can see these are the projects we have. So we have docker compose.yaml. These are the files we have. Then we have the most important file, which is manage.py. And then we have our app here. We have requirements.txt. But then if you see here, we have the permissions issue here. If you can see, these two things have a root permission. Now we don't want root permission. We want the user to have the access there. And for that, I will say sudo chown -r. I will use user. Now using this, I can change my permission. Okay. So using this, I can change my permission. So if I say list, so now I have all the permissions here. Now once I got the permission, I can do anything with my files. I can delete my files. I can create new files. I can edit the existing files. Now, once I got that, it's time to run this project. But how do we run this? Now, of course, I want to run this application on the container. So this Django application will be running inside the container, which is running on the Docker engine and which is running on this OS. So we have to go in a Docker way. And to do that, we have to say Docker. Of course, you can build this image or you can run it. Otherwise, you can simply say Docker compose and you can simply say up. So if you want to start the container, say up. If you want to finish it, you can say down. Let's say up. It may take some time and it's up. Okay, it was quick. I hope there's no error. There's no error. Let me just try this. So I'll go back to my browser. So that's my browser. It's time to say 127.0.0.1:8000. I hope it will work, and it's working. You can see that we have our Django homepage up and running. So yes, we have not done any coding as of now, and that's why it is giving you a default page. But if you got this page, that means your system or your Django is actually running on the container. Example, if I just stop this, if I say Control-C to stop the container, and if I refresh this, you can see we got an error. So yes, it was running because of the container. Now this is working, but then we don't want a simple application like this to be running on the container, right? We want to have something. Maybe I just want to print hello world. If we can do that, we can do a lot of different stuff. So how do we do that? Now, if you want to create a project, how will you do that? So it's very simple. First, let's keep this up and running and let's open a new terminal. Now, of course, you can use a terminal of VS Code or I can use external terminal. Let me just use external terminal here, which we were using from a long time. And here I want to use that Docker image. So first of all, let me just see how many processes we are running. So you can see we have this process already running here. It's going in 2 lines, but let me just explain that. So that's your container ID. That's your image name, which is Telusko web. That's the command it is passing to run this application. And the important thing is the name. The name of your container is Telusko web 1. Now, using this container, I want to create a new project or a new app. So in the existing project, we want to get a new app. That's how Django works. So if you want to have a separate thing you want to do, you have to create an app. And let's create an app here. Now, how do we create an app? It's very simple. So you have to use the existing container. Now, if you want to execute something on the existing container, you will say docker ekcc, which is execute. And you have to mention the name of the image, name of the container, that is Telusko-web-1. And then you have to pass the command. The command to create a new app is Python manage.py start app and the app name, of course. I want to create an app as greet. So this will greet a user. Let's say enter. It worked? Yeah. So if you can see, if you go to VS Code, we have our app ready. So it's so simple, right? Just use the existing container and create the app. Now, once you have your app ready, it's time to make it run. So what exactly I want to create is, if I go back to this home page and if I say /hello, it should print hello world. That's it. As of now, it is giving you error, which is 404. Of course, we don't have any pages or the app built for that URL. Now, to make it work, we need to go to our VS Code, and that's where you have to do the coding. As of now, let me just close all these files just to reduce the complexity of the application. Now, how do we do that? So whenever I say hello, it should print hello world. Now for that, if you want to do something on this screen, you need to use views.py. That's where you define what response you want to send to the user. So first of all, if you want to send a response, you need to import Django.http, and you have to import what? HTTP response. Now, as I mentioned before, if you're not familiar with Django, I would recommend you to explore the Django series on this platform. Oh, I don't have enough permission. Retry a super user. I need a permission here, so maybe I just need to do that once again. Do I have the permission for greet? Yes, I have a permission now. Will it save? Yeah, it worked. So of course, once you create an app, you have to mention that you need a permission there. Now, once you got a permission, I will go back here, and I was able to save this application. Now, I want to create a function which will accept my request. So I will say def, and the function name can be, let's say, hello. I want to get a function for hello request. So I will say request. And this is where I will simply return the response. I mean, I'm just writing a very simple code. We can make it complex by adding some new features. And I just want to return hello world. But will this work? Of course not, right? It's not that simple. So even if you code it, and even if you run this application by saying up, it will not work. So if I go back to the browser, if I say refresh, nothing is working. So what went wrong? See, when you send a request, it will use we need to have a url.py file inside this grid. There is no way of specifying when to call this function. The way you do that is by creating a new file, which is urls.py. This is where you mention your the path. So to do that, you have to say from django.urls. You need to import path. Again, I'm not explaining all this thing in detail in this code. There is a separate video on this. You will find that in description area. And from I want to import views. Now once you got this too, you need to specify the URL pattern. So you have to say URL patterns, and that's where you have to mention multiple paths. So in your application you might be having, or in your app you will be having multiple URLs. So we are doing it for hello. Maybe you want to do it for the payment. You're doing it for some other request. So you have to mention all this thing in this path, in this URL pattern. So I have to say path. I'm requesting for hello, and I will say views.home. So views.hello. That's the name. Is it yeah, so function name is hello. So you have to say views.hello. That's the function name we are mentioning. And then you have to also mention the name of the application, name of the app. So we'll say hello, or name of the pattern, path. Okay, so this is done from this side, but will it work now? Even if you save and if you go back to the browser and if you say refresh, oh, it's not working. Why it's not working? It still says hello 404. So the thing is, the main application for your project is my site, and in this, if you can observe, we have urls.py. This is the main thing. So you have to configure this one as well. How do we configure this? So I have to say path, and this is where you have to mention, whenever you get a request for hello, you need to send request for okay, how do we do that? So we have to say include. In this, you have to mention the app name. What's going on? Yeah, so in this, you have to mention the URLs of greet. And the way you can do that is by saying greet.urls. So whenever you get a request for hello, this is where it has to map. Oh, that means we don't need to mention hello here. Okay, let's try. I hope this will work. I can just hope now. Let me just say up again. Oh, we got an error. It says, what? Include is not defined. Oh, my bad. Include has to be imported here. How can I miss that? So I will say up again, and it worked. You can see there's no error. I hope this will work on the browser as well. Let's refresh the browser. Oh, it worked. And so that we got hello world. It's that simple. That's how we can create a Django application on Docker. So basically you're running this on a container, so you can just pack this image, deploy it on or push that on the Docker hub, and anyone can use it without any installation. Of course, they have to install Docker, otherwise this will not work. So just to give you a quick recap what we have done, first of all, in your machine you need Docker, and you also need VS Code or any editor that for that matter. Now once you have Docker, you need to create a Django application. The way you can do that, if you can just follow this steps here. Okay, that's a new steps. I guess we have done on the terminal. Okay, so first step is you have to create this folder, which is Telusko. Of course, you can create any folder. And in that, you need to create 3 files, which are very important. One is the Docker file, where you have mentioned what is your base image and what requirements you have. And you have mentioned all the requirements in this special file, which is requirements.txt. This is where you have requirements.txt, where you have mentioned we are using Django. And in this Django, and then we have gone for the Docker compose, where you have mentioned what to do when you start your container. You need to run the server, and when you run the server, Django was working, but then we wanted to have our own app there, and the app which we have created is great. We have written some command like this. Oh no, we have there was a command to execute that. You will find this command in the description. And for using that, we have created this app, and in this app, we have to configure the views.py, we have to configure urls.py so that we can give the path, and this in the main path, in the main urls.py as well, you have to mention the path. And that's it. If you want to add new features, create new app, create new URL, write some URL path, create some functions, and this will work. So I hope you enjoyed. In the next video, we'll see how do you containerize the existing application. As I mentioned, there are 2 ways. You can start the application, you can start building the application on Docker, which we have done now, or you can build the application and then containerize it. So that's it from this video. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comment section, and do subscribe for further videos. Bye bye.